My name is Annie, and I'm 56 years old. What I'm about to tell you will forever change the way you see your own family. You'll look at your spouse, your children, and you'll wonder what secrets lie behind their eyes. You'll question the foundation of every family story, every shared memory. Because on my birthday, my own son and my daughter-in-law pushed my husband and me off a 40-foot cliff. As I lay there bleeding, shattered on the rocks, I heard my husband, Patrick, whisper through his own broken body, "Annie, stay still and play dead. Don't move. Pretend to be dead." But the shove, the fall, the betrayal that wasn't the worst of it. The terrible truth Patrick revealed in that ravine was a horror far greater than the fall. The sun on the Ashen Peak Trail was a gentle, forgiving gold, dappling through the ancient pines. It was my 65th birthday, and Patrick, my husband of 47 years, had planned this whole day. A gentle hike to the Serpent's Vista, a picnic with a view that stretched for 100 miles, and then dinner at the rustic lodge where we'd spent our honeymoon. "You're moving well for an old girl," Patrick teased, his hand warm and familiar in mine. His hair was a shock of white against his weathered, kind face, and his eyes, the color of a summer sky, crinkled at the corners. "Speak for yourself, you old goat," I shot back, squeezing his fingers. "I could still out-hack you on my worst day." It was a comfortable, worn-out banter, the soundtrack of our lives. We were Annie and Patrick Reed, pillars of our small community, retired, comfortable, and blissfully, naively happy. Our greatest pride was our son, Dylan, our brilliant, handsome boy, the surgeon who had married the lovely, delicate Rachel. They were waiting for us at the trailhead, a picture-perfect couple. Dylan, with my Patrick's strong jaw and my own dark eyes, looked the part of the devoted son in his expensive hiking gear. Rachel, slender and ethereal with her corn silk hair, clung to his arm, her smile a little too bright, a little too fixed. "Mom, Dad, ready for your birthday adventure?" Dylan's voice was hearty, a little too loud for the quiet mountain morning. He clapped Patrick on the back, a gesture that once felt like affection but now, in hindsight, carried a jarring force. "We've been ready for an hour, son," Patrick said, his tone even, but I felt the slightest tension in his arm. A flicker of something unreadable passed behind his eyes, gone so quickly I thought I'd imagined it. The hike began pleasantly enough. The path was a ribbon of packed earth and stone, winding upwards through fragrant groves of fir and spruce. The air was thin and clean. Rachel chattered about the interior design project she was working on, her words a nervous, fluttering stream. Dylan walked slightly ahead, his posture rigid. "The view from the vista is supposed to be unparalleled," Patrick commented, his gaze scanning the trees, the rocks, the path ahead. He was unusually observant, his usual relaxed demeanor replaced by a quiet, focused intensity. "It's why we chose it, Dad," Dylan said, glancing back. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "A perfect, private spot for a family celebration." The word private hung in the air, suddenly laden with a new, ominous weight. I shook the feeling off. I was being a paranoid old woman. This was my son, my Dylan. We reached the Serpent's Vista after 2 hours of steady climbing. It was even more breathtaking than I remembered. A granite outcrop jetted out over the world, providing a dizzying, majestic view of the valley below, a patchwork of green and gold under the vast open sky. The only sound was the whisper of the wind and the distant cry of a hawk. "Oh, Patrick," I breathed, my heart swelling. "It's just as beautiful." He didn't answer. He was looking at Dylan, who was setting down his backpack, his movements slow and deliberate. Rachel stood a few feet away, her arms wrapped around herself, shivering despite the sun. "Here, Mom," Dylan said, pulling out a fancy thermos. "I brought your favorite, chai tea with a splash of brandy, to warm you up." He poured a cup and handed it to me. The porcelain was warm against my hands. I took a sip. It was perfectly spiced, sweet, and laced with the familiar, comforting burn of the brandy Patrick always kept in his study. But as I swallowed, I saw Patrick's face. He was staring at Dylan, his expression a terrifying mixture of grief and resignation. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head. My blood ran cold. "Dylan?" I said, my voice trembling. It was then that everything happened with the slow, crystalline clarity of a nightmare. Dylan's face, once so beloved, contorted into a mask of cold, detached purpose. He took a step towards Patrick. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said, and the words were empty, rehearsed. In that split second, Patrick's eyes met mine. They were not the eyes of a surprised man. They were the eyes of a man watching a long-dreaded prophecy finally come to pass. Dylan shoved him. Hard. A guttural cry tore from my throat. "Patrick!" I lunged for my husband, my fingers brushing against the rough fabric of his jacket before a second pair of hands slammed into my back. Rachel. Her delicate, manicured hands. The force was immense, brutal. The world upended. The brilliant blue sky and the stark granite face tumbled over and over in a nauseating carousel. The air was ripped from my lungs. Branches snapped like gunshots, and a searing, white-hot pain exploded in my side, my leg, my head. Then, nothing. A void of shock and agony. I came to moments later, or perhaps it was hours. Time had become a sticky, meaningless concept. I was lying on a bed of sharp rocks and damp leaves at the base of the cliff, 30 feet below the vista. Every breath was a knife twist in my ribs. My left leg was bent at an impossible angle. Warm blood trickled down my temple, blurring my vision. A moan escaped my lips, a feeble, animal sound of pain. Through the roaring in my ears, I heard a scuffling sound from a few feet away. Patrick. He was lying prone, his face a bloody mask, one arm twisted beneath him. But his eyes were open, and they were locked on me. He moved his lips, a barely perceptible movement. The sound that emerged was a wet, ragged whisper, so faint I had to strain to hear it over the thumping of my own heart. "Annie, don't move. Don't make a sound. Pretend we are dead." The command, delivered with such desperate, urgent clarity, cut through the fog of my pain. Pretend to be dead. My son had done this. My son and his wife. The understanding was a second, more profound fall. I let my body go limp, my head lolling to the side, my eyes open just a slit, staring unseeingly at a moss-covered rock. Above, I heard their voices, muffled but clear in the mountain stillness. Are they? It was Rachel! Her voice shrill with panic. "It's 30 feet onto rocks. No one survives that." Dylan's voice was cold, clinical. The voice of a surgeon stating a fact. It's done. But what if they're not? What if someone finds them? No one hikes this lower section. It's all loose scree. By the time a random hiker stumbles down here, the animals and the elements will have done their work. It will be a tragic accident. A couple of seniors, too confident, too close to the edge. I heard a sob from Rachel. "I can't believe your own parents, Dylan." "They were a liability," he hissed, his voice dropping, but the mountain air carried it down to us like a curse. A ticking time bomb. It was them or us. Our future, Rachel. Everything we've built. There was a long silence, then the sound of their retreating footsteps, crunching on gravel, growing fainter and fainter until they were swallowed by the wind. Still, I didn't move. I lay there, playing dead, the cold from the rocks seeping into my bones, a cold that was nothing compared to the ice forming in my soul. Our own son, our Dylan, a liability, a ticking time bomb, minutes stretched into an eternity. The only sounds were the wind and a faint, ragged breathing from Patrick. Finally, when the silence was absolute and the sun had dipped lower, casting long skeletal shadows across the ravine, I dared to twitch a finger. "Patrick," I whispered, my voice a dry croak. He stirred, a groan of pure agony ripping from his chest. He tried to push himself up, but collapsed back onto the stones. I dragged myself towards him, every movement a fresh hell, leaving a smeared trail of blood on the rocks. I reached his side, my trembling hand finding his. His face was a ruin. A deep gash on his forehead oozed blood, his lip was split, and I could see the stark white of bone protruding through the skin of his forearm. But his eyes, those summer sky eyes, were lucid, burning with a terrible knowledge. "Annie," he rasped, his grip tightening on my hand. "Listen to me. We don't have much time. He pushed us," I sobbed, the reality finally breaking through the shock. "Dylan, our boy, it's my fault," Patrick whispered, a tear cutting a clean path through the grime and blood on his cheek. "All my fault. I knew I've known for a while." "Known what? What did we do? The money? Was it the trust fund? We gave him everything." "It's not about money, Annie." He used my full name, and it sounded like a final, solemn vow. It made my heart clench. "It's about the fire." The word landed like a physical blow. "The fire?" It had happened 25 years ago, a lifetime ago. A terrible, tragic accident at the summer home of Patrick's business partner, Robert Miller. A house fire that had claimed the lives of Robert and his wife, Sarah. Dylan, only 10 at the time, had been there for a sleepover with their son, Mark. He'd escaped through a window, the sole survivor. The trauma had haunted him for years. We'd sent him to the best therapists, held him through the nightmares. We never spoke of it. "What about the fire, Patrick?" My voice was barely audible. He took a shuddering breath, wincing in pain. "It was never an accident, Annie." The world stopped. The wind died. The very rocks beneath me seemed to shift. "What are you saying?" "The investigators, they found traces of an accelerant. In the hallway outside the master bedroom, they were sure it was arson." My mind reeled. "But they ruled it an electrical fire. You told me it was faulty wiring." I lied. The words were a confession, torn from the depths of him. I lied to the investigators. I lied to you. I lied to everyone. Why, Patrick? For God's sake, why? He coughed, a wet hacking sound that speckled his lips with blood. Because of the baseball cap. A memory, fragmented and dusty, surfaced. A Little League baseball cap. Blue and white. Dylan's favorite. He'd been distraught that he'd lost it at the Millers. "The fire chief," Patrick continued, his voice growing weaker. "He was an old friend from college. He came to me before he filed the official report. He showed me the cap. It was found in the hallway. Ani. Soaked in gasoline. It had Dylan's name written inside the band. No. The denial was a silent scream in my head. No, not my 10-year-old boy. He loved the Millers. Robert was like a second father to him. He was just a child." I protested, my grip on his hand becoming frantic. "He couldn't have—" "He could," Patrick said, his eyes filled with a bottomless sorrow. "The therapist, Dr. Evans," she warned us. "Remember? She said he had profound attachment issues, a terrifying capacity for rage when he felt slighted. Robert had promised to take him to a ball game that weekend, but he had to cancel for a business trip. Dylan was on Nash. Furious. He felt betrayed. The pieces, jagged and horrifying, began to click into place. The intense soaking silence for days before the sleepover. The way he'd said, "He's a liar," about Robert. "I found the gas can," Patrick whispered, his confession a torrent now, as if he had to purge it before death took him. He'd hidden it in our own garage. Our son, he set the fire. He killed 2 people because he was angry about a baseball game. The truth was a physical weight, crushing the air from my lungs. I felt myself splintering, breaking apart on those rocks. "And you covered it up? What choice did I have?" he cried, a desperate, broken sound. He was 10 years old. They would have institutionalized him, destroyed his life before it began. My friend of the chief, he gave me a choice. I could take the cap, and he would list the cause as inconclusive, likely electrical, or he could pursue it, and our son would be taken from us. I chose my son. I buried the cap in the backyard that night. I carried that secret. I built our lives on Werber. That lie? For 25 years. He had carried this alone. The weight of it must have been unbearable. The guilt, the fear, the constant gnawing dread. I thought if we loved him enough, guided him, it would be okay. That it was a monstrous, childish mistake he would outgrow. Patrick's breath was becoming more shallow. But I watched him, Annie. All these years. I saw the lack of remorse, the way he manipulates people, the coldness in his eyes when he doesn't get what he wants. He's a surgeon because he lacks the power, the control over life and death. Not to heal. The final, terrible piece of the puzzle slammed into place. He knows, I breathed, the realization dawning with icy certainty. Dylan knows you know. Patrick nodded weakly. A month ago, he was over, helping me clean out the old shed. We found a box of his old things, that Little League team photo. He made a joke about it, a dark joke about fires and lost caps, and he looked at me. Annie. He looked right at me. And in that moment, I knew that he knew. He'd always known what I did, and he saw the fear in my eyes. He saw that his one vulnerability, the one secret that could destroy the perfect life he'd built, was safe with me only as long as I was alive. You. The fall wasn't an act of sudden rage. It was a cold, calculated corporate takeover. We were liabilities. Loose ends. The only 2 people on Earth who knew that the brilliant, respected Dr. Dylan Reed was, at his core, a murderer. The weight of it all pressed down on me, the physical agony of my broken body, the emotional devastation of my son's betrayal, and now, the horrific, decade-spanning truth of my husband's secret. The world went gray at the edges. "Annie!" Patrick gasped, his grip on my hand going slack. You have to survive. You have to." His eyes lost their focus, staring past me at the darkening sky. The light in them, that steady, loving light that had guided me for nearly half a century, flickered and went out. His hand went limp in mine. "Patrick?" I whispered, shaking him. "Patrick!" But he was gone. He had died bearing the weight of a secret meant to protect his son, a secret that had ultimately gotten us both killed. I was alone. At the bottom of a cliff, broken and bleeding, the cold night air beginning to bite. Above me, somewhere, my son and his wife were already crafting their story of the tragic hiking accident. They would be the grieving, dutiful children, inheriting everything. But they had made one mistake. They hadn't made sure I was dead. A sound ripped from my throat, not a sob of grief, but a raw, guttural growl of pure, undiluted rage. It echoed softly in the ravine, a promise. The pain in my leg, my ribs, my head became fuel. The image of Patrick's lifeless eyes became my compass. They thought they had silenced us. They thought the past was buried. But I am Annie Reed, a mother betrayed, a widow murdered, and I am not dead yet. Using my one good arm, I began to drag myself, inch by agonizing inch, away from my husband's body, towards a cluster of large boulders that offered a sliver of shelter. It wasn't a plan. It was an instinct. The instinct to survive, to live long enough to unearth the truth they had tried to bury with us at the bottom of this cliff. The first star winked into existence in the violet sky above. I looked at it, my breath pluming in the frigid air. My family was gone. My life as I knew it was over. But as I lay there in the gathering dark, a new, terrifying purpose was born. It was no longer about survival. It was about revenge. The boulders were colder than the grave Patrick now lay in. I wedged myself into the narrow crevice between two of them, the granite scraping against my broken ribs. Every shift of my body was a fresh lesson in agony, a white-hot fire that threatened to swallow my consciousness whole. But the cold was a blessing. It numbed the edges of the pain, and more importantly, it kept me awake. It kept the image of Dylan's remorseless face and Patrick's dying eyes burning in the forefront of my mind. Survive. It was no longer a wish. It was a command issued by my dead husband. My first task was to take stock of the ruin my son had made of me. My left leg was useless, a misshapen log of throbbing pain. My right arm, though aching, could move. I could feel the sticky warmth of blood manning my hair, but the flow seemed to have slowed to a sluggish trickle. My ribs screamed with every shallow breath, a sure sign some were cracked, if not broken. I was a collection of broken parts, but the core engine, my will, my rage was intact and roaring. The night was my blanket and my prison. The temperature plummeted, and I began to shiver uncontrollably, my teeth chattering like frantic castanets. Hypothermia would kill me as surely as the fall. I had to get moving. But where? The cliff face was unscalable in my condition. The ravine stretched in two directions, a river of jagged stone and dense undergrowth. Then I remembered. Patrick, the meticulous planner, had insisted we both carry emergency whistles on our keychains, the shrill, piercing kind used by boaters. He'd always been a little paranoid, a trait I now understood was born from a secret guilt. I fumbled with my bloody fingers in the pocket of my hiking pants. My heart stuttered, then leapt. The cold metal was still there. I didn't blow it. Not yet. The sound would carry, a beacon in the silence. What if Dylan and Rachel were still nearby, waiting, listening for any sign of life? I had to assume they were as cunning as they were cruel. The whistle was a last resort. Instead, I focused on the second part of Patrick's paranoia, the trail map. He'd studied it for weeks, tracing alternate routes. He'd pointed out a ranger's access road, an old fire break that cut through the lower part of this ravine about a mile east. Just in case, he'd said. His foresight was a final gift. A mile. It might as well have been 100. But it was a direction, a purpose. The journey that followed was a descent into a new kind of hell. I became an animal, dragging my broken body over rock and root. I used my good arm to pull, my good leg to push, creating a pathetic, crawling momentum. The world narrowed to the next foot of ground, the next gasp of air. Visions flickered at the edges of my consciousness. Dylan's first steps, his small hand in mine on his first day of school, his proud smile at his medical school graduation. Each memory was a shard of glass in my soul, beautiful and bleeding. The man who had pushed us was a monster wearing my son's face. Dawn was a pale, indifferent smear in the sky when I heard it, the distant, low grumble of an engine. I froze, my ear pressed to the cold ground. It was real. The firebreak road. A new, more potent fear seized me. What if it was them? What if they'd anticipated this? I shrunk back against a tree, my heart hammering against my broken ribs. The sound grew louder. A dirty, green Forest Service pickup truck rattled into view, bouncing slowly over the rutted track. This was the moment. Trust or die. I pushed myself onto my knees, my body shrieking in protest. I raised the whistle to my cracked lips and blew with all the breath I had left. The sound was shockingly loud, a piercing shriek that cut through the morning calm. The truck jerked to a halt. A man in a ranger's uniform jumped out, his face a mask of alarm. He saw me, a blood-caked, wild-eyed creature half-raising from the dirt. "Help me!" I croaked, and then the world went black. I surfaced in fragments, the sterile smell of antiseptic, the steady beep of a heart monitor, the blurry face of a nurse, the deep, concerned voice of a detective. "Mrs. Reed? Annie? Can you hear me? You're in the hospital. You're safe. Safe." The word was a mockery. I was alive. That was different. I learned I had been found by Ranger Evans. I had a concussion, 3 broken ribs, a fractured femur, and severe lacerations. I've been in and out of consciousness for 2 days. My first coherent thought, when my vision cleared, was of Patrick. My second was of the story. The detective, a weary-looking man named Corbin, sat by my bed. "Your son and daughter-in-law are outside," he said gently. "They've been devastated. They said you and your husband fell from the Serpent's Vista." I looked at him, at his kind, believing eyes. This was the story they had crafted. The grieving, innocent children. I saw the trap with perfect clarity. If I accused them now, with no evidence, I would look like a grief-stricken, delirious old woman, my perception skewed by trauma. They would paint me as unstable. It would be their word against mine. Dylan, the respected surgeon, and his charming wife against a broken, hysterical widow. Patrick's final lesson was my guide. Pretend. I let my eyes well with tears. I let my lower lip tremble. It was so fast," I whispered, my voice frail. "Patrick, he slipped. He reached for me and I fell." I delivered their lie back to them, wrapped in a performance of shattered grief. I saw the faint relaxation in Detective Corbin's shoulders. He believed me. When Dylan and Rachel were allowed in, their performance was Oscar-worthy. Rachel's eyes were puffy and red. Dylan's face was a sculpture of anguish. He rushed to my bedside, taking my hand, his touch making my skin crawl. "Mom," he breathed, his voice thick with false emotion. "Thank God. We thought we lost you both." I met his gaze, and for a single, unguarded moment, I let him see it. Not grief, not confusion. I let him see the cold, knowing truth in my eyes. I saw the flicker of surprise, then a swift, calculating calm that returned to his face. He understood. The game had changed. I was a player, not a victim. "I'm tired, Dylan," I said, my voice a frail thread. "So tired." He nodded, squeezing my hand a little too tightly. "Rest, Mom. We'll take care of everything." And they tried. Dylan, using his medical authority, subtly questioned my mental state with the doctors, suggesting the head trauma might cause confabulation. Rachel took charge of my house, my belongings, helping to sort through Patrick's things. They were circling, waiting for me to make a mistake or to simply die of my injuries. But I was already moving. From my hospital bed, I became a general plotting a war. My first call was to Martha, my oldest friend, a woman who feared neither God nor man. I spoke in a code we'd used since childhood, telling her I needed her to check on my rose bushes and that Patrick had left a special tool for them in the garage. She understood the urgency. While Rachel was busy playing the dutiful daughter-in-law in my living room, Martha was in my garage. Under an old sack of potting soil, exactly where Patrick had once shown me in a moment of macabre confidence, she found a small locked metal box. Inside, buried for 25 years, was a little blue and white baseball cap, sealed in a plastic bag. The fabric was stained and reeked faintly of gasoline. And tucked beside it was a handwritten note from Patrick, a testament and a confession, detailing everything he had just told me in the ravine, signed and dated. He had prepared for this. He had given me the weapon. I didn't go to the police. Not yet. Evidence alone might not be enough. Dylan was too smart, too connected. He could find a way to explain it a why-a-sick joke, a father's senile fantasy. I needed a confession. I began my own performance. I played the part of the broken, fading widow. I let my hand tremble when I spoke. I let my gaze grow distant. I allowed them to believe they were winning. I even signed over temporary power of attorney to Dylan, a move that made him drop his guard considerably. He thought I was surrendering. The final act was set at my home, a week after I was discharged. I was in a wheelchair, my leg in a cast. Dylan and Rachel were there, going through financial papers, their avarice barely concealed. It's just so sad, Rachel sighed, not looking sad at all, as she admired a silver vase. That Patrick was so careless. He was, I said, my voice quiet. I had positioned myself near the bookshelf, my hand resting on the spine of a large family photo album. But he was also prepared. Dylan looked up, his eyes narrowing. What do you mean, Mom? I opened the album, not to a photo, but to a hollowed-out compartment I had made days before. I pulled out the plastic-bagged baseball cap. The color drained from Dylan's face. It was a visceral reaction, a crack in his perfect facade. Rachel let out a small, sharp gasp. He left this for me, I said, my voice losing its frailty, gaining the steel I had forged in the ravine. Along with a letter. He knew you'd come for us one day, Dylan. He knew the little boy who set that fire never went away. He just got better at hiding. Dylan took a step forward, his hands clenching into fists. The caring son was gone, replaced by the cold-eyed killer from the cliff. You have no idea what you're talking about, you crazy old bitch. Give that to me. Or what? I asked softly. You'll push my wheelchair down the stairs? It won't work this time. Martha has copies of the letter. If anything happens to me, it goes to the police, along with that. I pointed a trembling, but deliberate, finger at the cap. He was trapped, and he knew it. The weight of his entire, perfect life crashing down. The rage he'd kept bottled since childhood finally boiled over. He deserved it, Dylan snarled, his voice a guttural roar. Robert Miller! He promised me! He lied! They all lie? And he pointed a shaking finger at the space where Patrick should have been. He covered it up. He made me live with it. He thought his little secret made him better than me, that he owned me. I was just cleaning up his mess. I was silencing the only other person who knew what I was. The room was silent. His confession hung in the air, stark and undeniable. From the hallway, Detective Corbin stepped into the doorway. He wasn't looking weary anymore. He looked grim and satisfied. In his hand was a digital recorder. My final call from the hospital had not been to Martha, but to him, telling him to be here, to hear the truth from the killer's own mouth. Dylan and Rachel were arrested then and there. The trial was short. The cap, the letter, and the recorded confession were unassailable. Dylan was convicted on 2 counts of murder for the Millers and 2 counts of murder for Patrick and my attempted murder. Rachel was his accomplice. They will both die in prison. The revenge was not sweet. It was ashes. I had destroyed my son, the boy I had raised and loved, to avenge the man I had loved more. I live alone in the house full of ghosts, a monument to a family built on a lie that finally collapsed. Patrick's secret died with Dylan's conviction. The world sees a tragic story of a murderous son. But sometimes, in the deep silence of the night, I close my eyes and I'm back on those cold rocks. I feel Patrick's hand in mine and I hear his dying whisper, a truth more terrible than the fall. And I know, with a certainty that aches in my healed bones, that I would drag myself through that hell again. Not for revenge, but for him.